So I don't have to tell you that GPU prices are basically kind of out of control. There's stuff that usually happens that the prices go up. We have external factors. We have all the tariffs. So there's a lot going on. Let's take a look at the 5080 today. You know, the 5080 is supposed to be $999 MSRP, right? On paper, that looks good. It's a good GPU for that price, especially considering the situation now. That's an amazing GPU for $1,000 because you can't find it for that price. Unless you get lucky in an occasional drop, you're going to be paying, in some cases, almost twice that amount. Let's look at some of the products. Like, for example, you have the high end, you know, the Asus Astro. It's up to $1799. That's a pretty substantial price increase. I think it was $1499, just like the Asus Strix previously, the 4080 and the 4080 Super. So that's a premium product, but that's $300 change in a few short months. So more than the 4090. I mean, and it's slower than the 4090 in pretty much every case or most cases, unless you count DLSS 4. That's pretty crazy, right? It's more expensive than the 4090 was at launch, and it's slower. I don't know if that makes too much sense. Usually, at least you want things to be better. At least the 5090 is better than the 4090, and it's a lot more expensive, but at least it's better. But here, the 5080 is worse than the 4090, but it's more expensive. And it's not just this Asus GPU. You could even look at, you know, Asus's other GPUs on the line, like the TUF, for example, started at $1349, which is a hefty premium still over the $999 MSRP. And now it's $1599, so it's exactly the same price as a 4090's MSRP was. And I'm not saying you could have gotten a 4090 easily at $1599, but some were available. They, you know, I remember seeing them when my Micro Center had stock on launch day. There was 150 4090s on day one. I know because I was in line, and they had $1599 models. And the most expensive one was, you know, probably the Asus Strix, which was around $2,000 at the time, a little under. But the prices stayed relatively close within that first year. But now we're seeing, even on the 5080, prices really skyrocket. And now let's hear a word from our sponsor, VIP-CDKdeals.com, a Windows Pro CD key. Add to cart, you put in code CC20. This will also work on Windows 11. You want to go into your settings in Windows, change and adjust your CD key, click activate, and now let's go back to the video. The interesting big difference between the 5080 and the 5090, aside from the price and the performance, is that the 5080 you can actually buy at a retailer more readily. Like if you check out Best Buy, you'll see that they're in stock more often than not. You know, Micro Center had a whole wall of them, you know, a decent amount along with other GPUs. Everything basically but the 5090, which I guess you could look at it as being weird because the 5090 is literally almost twice the price as a lot of these GPUs. You know, the Asus Astro 5090 is now $3359, which is a crazy price. So that's like almost, you know, basically where it is more than twice the price of the you know, the 4090 Founders Edition when that came out, and it's pretty close to twice the price of even the Asus Strix 4090, which was the high-end one from Asus at that time. And it's faster than a 4090, but it's not, you know, twice as fast or worth that diminishing return. So the 5080, should you buy a 5080? Maybe that's the question, because people still need to buy GPUs, right? That's a difficult one to answer. I mean, it's slower than a 4090, so that's a tough one, right? Like, if you see a 4090 and a 5080 for close to the same price, which one do you get? That's a pretty interesting question to ponder. Let's see, what are you missing? You're missing DLSS 4. That's basically it, right? And maybe it's a little bit more efficient, a little bit better power draw. But then the 4090 has 24 gigabytes of VRAM. That's better than the 16 on the 5080. The 4090 is also faster rasterization, right? It's going to be faster in many cases than the 5080, sometimes by a pretty decent chunk still. The 5080 can get close in some games, but in general, you can say the 4090 is still a better GPU. DLSS 3 is pretty good on the 4090. Most people feel like that's probably more than enough, and it might be another generation before DLSS 4 and beyond are much better that you would notice a difference. And there are problems with DLSS 4. So if you get a 4090 at a decent price, I mean, there, obviously warranty concerns. It's going to be an older GPU at this point, but 5080 is not really the best value. But if you need a new GPU that's really high end without going to, something like the 5090, I guess you don't have too much of a choice unless you drop down a little bit to like a 5070 Ti, for example, or even the 4070 Ti Super. If you get that cheap enough, maybe even half the price of a 5080, that's not really that bad, because you're getting the same amount of VRAM, 16 gigabytes, and yeah, slower, DLSS 3, but you're also saving half the amount of money, which is important for gamers, especially when you're building a PC. You got other things to worry about, or you want to upgrade your GPU. So it's an interesting one, the 5080, because the 80 was not popular at all recently. Like the 4080, nobody wanted. The 4080 Super was finally good at $999, but then maybe it was a little bit too late. The 3080 was awesome at $699, but you could never find it at that price, and it went up to $1,200 because of all the shortages back then. So the 80's been kind of cursed, actually. I mean, the 5090 is just out of the gate always really expensive. So that's been terrible, like on that side. But the 5080 and the 80 series used to be a great GPU, right? Remember the 1080 and the 1080 Ti? Like those were pretty good. 699, 1080 Ti, and you get basically the best gaming performance for a long time. Like those were definitely the golden years of GPU values and pricing, and none of this DLSS, which I do like DLSS, don't get me wrong, but you shouldn't lead with it as a main selling point. It should be a feature that maybe you want to turn on in a game and it's nice to have, but it shouldn't be buy this GPU because it's faster. That's not really, we're not at that point yet. If they want to be at that point, they have to give us something incredible where you turn on DLSS 5 when that comes out, for example, and you're like, I'm never going back to traditional rasterized performance because this is like incredible. It looks even sharper. Your performance and latency are perfect. Then you can sell the GPU with that. You could be like, all right, this, whatever it is, the 6070 in the future is like, 1,000 times faster than any other GPU, and it looks better than anything else, and it's this price. So then you can sell DLSS as a main feature. But right now, not every game takes advantage of it. So a lot of games are still traditional rasterization. The ones that do sometimes have some problems. It is a great technology. And I mean, it has to be the future because NVIDIA wants it to be the future and they control the narrative, right? So if they're telling us that AI is the future, it's going to be the future. Like, what are we going to do? What am I going to do? I'm going to be like, no, it's going to be rasterized. Like, I don't make games, I don't make GPUs. They have the control and they're going to aim it in that direction. They would only change it if it happened to be really bad and the market maybe responded negatively. But most people won't care, I think, as long as it looks and performs good. And it seems like you're getting better performance. So, the 5080 is definitely a tough one. There's no point in saying it's too expensive because the prices just keep going up and there's no other option. So if you have a GPU like a 4090, that probably wasn't a bad value depending on the price that you got. So if the 5080 is too expensive, on my next video, I'm going to cover the 5070 Ti. That might be a little bit more attractive, and 749 is a much better starting price. But once again, we don't see it at that price. It's closer to $1,000 and maybe sometimes even more. So it's almost like the prices are really getting swapped. The 5080's price is really the 5070 Ti. And the 5090's price is getting pretty close to the 5080. Look at that Asus Astro for $1799 for 5080. That's only $200 off of 5090, but the 5090 is over $3,000 realistically for almost all of the models in the real world. So that means all the other GPUs are going up in price as well. All right, guys, so let me know what you think down below. Is it a bad time to buy a GPU? I think so. That's not even a question. That's probably just a rhetorical question. But let me know what you think anyway, how the future is going to be, and especially about the 5080. Remember to subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next video.